Welcome to the Radically Genuine Podcast. I'm Dr. Roger McFillin, currently writing my book and involved in some research. So let me start off here with a little bit of a story. The year was 1983. The Cold War is at its hottest point in about 20 years. Ronald Reagan is in the White House. And a few months prior to this, the Soviets shot down a Korean civilian airliner over the Sea of Japan, killing all 269 people on board. In November, NATO will run a war game called Able Archer 83. Soviet intelligence, watching it unfold, will become convinced the West is preparing a first strike. So it's one of the more dangerous years in the entire 20th century. And inside a secure facility at Fort George Meade in Maryland, headquarters of the United States Army Intelligence and Security Command, there's an officer by the name of Wayne McDonald. He's a lieutenant colonel, career military, cleared at the highest levels of the United States government. And the report he's writing is 29 pages long. It's being prepared for the CIA. It was classified the moment it was finished, and it will remain classified for the next 20 years. The subject of the report is on human consciousness, an interest of mine, of course. McDonald had been given an assignment. He had been asked to evaluate whether the science underneath a particular military training program was sound. The program is called the Gateway Process. It was developed at a strange little institute tucked in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia, and it was founded by a former radio executive named Robert Monroe. And this is where it gets unusual. Robert Monroe was not a mystic. He wasn't a spiritual teacher. He was a businessman. In the 1950s, he ran one of the largest radio syndication companies in America. He produced over 400 radio shows a week. He had a wife, children, drove a station wagon. And in 1958, while lying in bed one night, he began to experience something that he could not understand. His body began to vibrate. He felt himself separating from his body. And then he was floating above his own bed, looking down at himself. He thought he was having a stroke, so he went to the doctors, then specialists, then psychiatrists. Nobody could find anything wrong. But the experience continued. Sometimes they lasted for seconds, sometimes hours. He found that during them, he could move through walls. He could travel to distant places. He could observe events, and the events, when he later checked, had actually occurred. So this businessman did what businessmen do. He started researching. He built a laboratory. He hired engineers and physicists and EEG technicians. He bought land in the Virginia mountains, and over the next 20 years, he and his team developed a technology they called hemisync. The principle was straightforward. Play one audio frequency in the left ear, play a slightly different frequency in the right ear. The brain perceives the difference and begins to entrain itself to that difference, synchronizing the two hemispheres and producing reproducible altered states of consciousness. By the late 1970s, the United States Army had heard about it, and they had questions, of course. Could you train an intelligence officer using only sound to enter a state in which they could remote view a Soviet submarine pen, a weapons facility, a hidden bunker in Iran? Could you build a unit of soldiers whose consciousness could leave their bodies, gather intelligence, and bring it back? I know this sounds sci-fi, doesn't it? The umbrella program that funded this work was eventually called Stargate. It ran in various forms from the early 1970s to 1995. It cost the American taxpayers tens of millions of dollars. It was administered at different points by the Defense Intelligence Agency, the CIA, and the Army. It employed full-time remote viewers. The most famous of them were men named Joe McNanigal, Pat Price, Ingo Swann, and the program produced results, documented results. One intelligence officer produced enough verified intelligence over the course of his career that he was awarded the Legion of Merit, one of the highest non-combat military honors in the United States, for the United States Army. So in 1993, when Wayne McDonald sits down at a desk in Fort Meade and begins typing his classified report, he is not writing about fringe science. He is writing about a program the United States government has been investing in heavily for over a decade. And he's being asked to explain how it actually works. His conclusion is unambiguous. Consciousness is not confined to the brain. He builds his case on the work of two scientists. The first is David Bohm, a theoretical physicist who worked directly with Einstein at Princeton. Bohm produced that the universe is, Bohm proposed that the universe is holographic, that every point in space contains information about every other point, that what we perceive as solid, separate, three-dimensional reality is actually a projection out of a deeper, undivided wholeness. He called that deeper level the implicate order. The second scientist is Carl Pribram, a neurosurgeon and neuroscientist at Stanford. Pribram had spent decades trying to find where specific memories were stored in the brain. He could never find them. He could damage almost any part of the brain and the memories would still be there. Eventually, he came to a radical conclusion. Memory is not stored in the brain. The brain is a receiver. It tunes into a field that exists outside of it. McDonald synthesized the two. He argued that the human body, when properly trained, becomes what he called a coherent oscillator, vibrating at a frequency of roughly 7 to 7.5 cycles per second. So now why does that matter? Because that frequency, 7 to 7.5 hertz, is functionally identical to something called the Schumann resonance. The Schumann resonance is a standing electromagnetic wave that exists in the cavity between the surface of the Earth and the lower edge of the ionosphere. It pulses at about 7.83 hertz. It surrounds you right now. It has surrounded every human being who's ever lived. When the human body tunes to that frequency, McDonald writes, it couples directly to the Earth's electromagnetic field, and it becomes capable of perceiving and transmitting information across distance without the limits of the physical senses, without the limits of time, and without the limits of the body itself. That is the conclusion of Lieutenant Colonel McDonald from the United States Army Intelligence, written for the CIA in 1983 as an official evaluation of a real ongoing taxpayer-funded military program. And there's one more detail. The detail I cannot stop thinking about, that the report is 29 pages long. It was declassified in 2003. It's publicly available right now. You can go to the CIA's own website and read it. I would encourage you, when this episode is over, to look it up yourself. But there's one thing. Page 25 is missing. Page 25 is referenced throughout the document. The text explicitly cites it. The argument depends on it, but in the declassified version, the page is not there. It's removed, redacted. CIA has never explained why. 28 pages they were willing to release. 1 page they were not. After 20 years of classification, whatever was on that page, somebody decided we were not ready to see it. And so that is where I begin today. Today I want to do something a little bit different. I want you to take a long walk through one of the most important ideas that we may encounter, an idea that, if you let it, will change the way you understand yourself and your life. It certainly alters the way we understand the mental health field or therapy. It's an idea that we're never exposed to, certainly not exposed to in graduate school. And It's this idea that we are active creator beings. Okay. I want to go a little beyond from what I just spoke about here, because there's some things I want to say, and it can get a bit uncomfortable. So stay with me, especially in the understanding of how we view reality from the materialist, almost atheist perspective. Because if Wayne McDonald was right, writing a classified analysis for the CIA, what he's saying, and he's concluding, and I think all the science, especially post-material science, is now confirming this itself, that human consciousness is not confined to the brain. So then the materials picture of reality, the picture every modern institution, mental health, our allopathic medical model is built on, it's wrong. And that's not a small claim. In fact, there's a whole pharmaceutical industry, a whole mental health industry that bases the experience, both emotional, the human experience itself, to be originating from key neurochemicals, brain chemicals, they call them. Consciousness itself originates from the brain. So when the brain dies, consciousness no longer exists. So before we go any further, okay, what he wrote in 1983, it's not an eccentric position. It was the conclusion that nearly every serious thinker and every wisdom tradition in the deepest reaches of modern physics has arrived at independently. So, for example, Max Planck won the Nobel Prize in 1918. He founded quantum theory. He's one of the most consequential scientists of the entire 20th century. Here is what he said about consciousness. I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as a derivative from consciousness. Those are his words. The founder of this field gave us nuclear power, semiconductors, lasers, modern chemistry. He spent his career staring into the smallest constitutes of the physical world, and he concluded that they were the derivative, that consciousness was the more fundamental thing. Okay, that means we, our own consciousness, is actively creating this experience, and that consciousness impacts matter. I can get into that more. Werner Heisenberg, who gave us the uncertainty principle, said that what we observe is not nature itself, but nature exposed to our method of questioning. The observer is part of the observation. John Wheeler, the Princeton physicist, coined the term black hole. He called the universe a participatory phenomenon. He spent the last decades of his career arguing that the universe requires observation in order to exist. Now, this is strange, I understand, but the most famous experiment in modern physics is the double slit experiment. It's been run thousands of times in laboratories all over the world. The results are always the same. A particle behaves like a wave when no one is watching it. And like a particle, that the moment someone is in the act of observation of it, the act of consciousness collapses the wave function. So without an observer, there's no defined location. Without consciousness, there is no thing. This is a foundation of physics. Once we observe it, then it alters. The implications for this, I think, are quite staggering, because what it means is that the materials picture, the one that our entire mental health system is built on, is at minimum incomplete, at maximum completely wrong, and our understanding of reality is not what we believe it to be. And all we have to do is really go back cross-culturally through wisdom traditions, the mystics, various forms of religion. They kind of say the same thing, like the Buddha. We are what we think. With our thoughts, we make the world. The Hermetic tradition declared the universe to be mental, all to be the mind. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. What a person sows, they will reap. Christ taught, according to your faith, it is done unto you. The kingdom of God is within you. The Hindu tradition called the world Maya, an appearance shaped by the consciousness that perceives it. The Sufi mystic said, What you seek is also seeking you. The yogic traditions developed entire systems for working with thought as a creative force. These are not different teachings. They are one teaching, spoken in different languages in different centuries, on different continents by people who, in many cases, had no contact with each other. They're all saying the same thing. The world you experience is not happening to you, it's being projected through you from the consciousness you carry into the field around you. Now, this is fascinating. So here's a question I want you to keep in mind as we move forward. What if this is true? Okay. The deepest physics of the 20th century is pointing here. Wisdom traditions and human history are pointing there. Classified reports from the United States Army to the CIA is pointing here. Your consciousness is not a passive observer sitting in a skull watching the world happen to you. Your consciousness is participating in the creation of the reality you are experiencing continuously, every second, whether you know it or not. And if this is true, and I believe it is, then what it means is you are constantly creating. We all are. That means what is going on in our background, our mind, the thoughts that we have, the emotional and energetic experiences, especially if we're not conscious of them, are being projected into a field. And we are returning back into our field of perception what we are putting out there. Now I want to bring this into something that is just a little more practical, okay? Into the office. Let's just think about the idea of a diagnosis, okay? Especially a psychiatric diagnosis. A 14-year-old girl whose mother brings her into the pediatrician because she's noticed she's been down, sad. Because you don't have to believe in remote viewing or the Schumann resonance or spirituality at all to kind of just take a look at what we're doing in the mental health field. The data is quite devastating, right? That 14-year-old girl who goes into the pediatrician's office, fills out a quick screening measure, is highly likely to be put on a mood and mind altering psychiatric drug. Now, if you've followed my work, one of the things I'm very clear about is the power of belief. And I talk about the role of the placebo effect, which isn't a great term, but the power of belief on outcome measures when we study this phenomenon. Irving Kirsch was a Harvard psychologist. He spent his career studying the placebo effect. Many years ago, he did something that I think should have ended the antidepressant debate forever at that point. He filed a Freedom of Information Act request. He obtained the clinical trial data for antidepressant drugs from the FDA, including the trials the pharmaceutical companies had run and chose to never publish, which are a lot. Under FDA regulations, you could run a trial, get a result you don't like, and just simply file it away. The FDA may see it, the public doesn't. So the negative results never really enter the scientific record. So doctors prescribing these drugs have no idea it exists. You just see what benefited the drugs, any type of trial that showed some statistical difference. So that's what gets published. And then there's a publication bias. When Kirsch added the buried trials back into the picture, he found the antidepressants outperformed the placebo on a Hamilton Depression Rating Scale by an average of 1.8 points, which is nothing. You understand that? It means absolutely nothing. It is not clinically relevant at all. They're the same. The United Kingdom's National Institute for Health and Care Excellence has established a 3-point threshold for clinical significance on that scale. So the drugs didn't meet it. Across the entire body of trial data, they are producing effects that are barely distinguishable from a sugar pill, published, peer-reviewed, confirmed by independent reanalysis. But the prescribing never stopped. Now, this is no big deal if antidepressant drugs or SSRIs don't have any problems with them. But as everyone knows, they do. And it gets much worse for that 14-year-old girl because there's been fraud and cover-up. The treatment for adolescents with depression study, the TADS one, the landmark trial that justified prescribing antidepressants to teenagers for 2 decades, when independent researchers got into the raw data, they discovered 2 things. First, the most powerful predictor of whether a teenager improved on the drug was not whether or not they actually received it. It was whether they believed they had. A teen who believed they were getting fluoxetine had actually been given a placebo showed an enhanced response. A teen who actually got the drug but believed they had been given a placebo showed a diminished one. So the belief was the driver. Remember that. Second, the suicide data had been miscoded. Or, my goodness, if you actually believe it was miscoded, like a mistake or an error, then I've got a bridge to sell you. The original paper reported a suicidal event rate of 9.2% on fluoxetine, which is Prozac, compared to 2.7% on placebo. That in itself is alarming. But the independent researcher, Swedish psychiatrist Goran Högberg, went through the raw data and he discovered that 9 subjects classified as placebo cases had in fact been taking fluoxetine at the time of their suicidal events. So with the misclassification corrected, the actual rate of suicide events on the drug was 11% compared to 2.7% on the placebo. The drug increased suicidal events in depressed teenagers 4-fold. So I'll say that again. The drug made depressed teenagers 4 times more likely to try to kill themselves. And this is a study that built the foundation for SSRI era in the pediatric psychiatry literature. The study cites this countless times. It's in the guidelines. The study every prescriber relies upon when they hand an SSRI to a teenager or a child, the drug, it turns out, didn't outperform a sugar pill, but it makes them 4 times more likely to kill themselves. The original investigators did not publicize this, of course, and the journals still have not retracted this paper. So if you understand my platform, why I am so outspoken and infuriated, that is a good reason. Folks, the placebo response is not a confound. And that's the point of today. The size of the placebo response itself, decade after decade, across psychiatry, cardiology, pain medicine, orthopedics, gastroenterology, dermatology, the placebo response is enormous. People who believe they are getting treatment improve measurably, reproducibly, often dramatically. And the mainstream response, or basically the pharmaceutical industry response, has been to treat this as a problem, a confound, something to be subtracted from the data so the real effect of the drug can be measured. But we should be asking ourselves the question that so many refuse to ask and should be critical in my field. If you're a therapist listening to this, if you're a physician or a parent, what if the placebo response is not a confound? I mean, it's not. This is the most important finding, one of the most important findings in medicine. It's the fact that human beings improve when they believe they are receiving something that can help. This is telling. It gives us an idea of what healing is. There's a study published in the New England Journal of Medicine, one of the most prestigious medical journals in the world, where patients with arthritis of the knee were divided into 3 groups. One received real arthroscopic surgery. One group received a placebo surgery where the surgical team made the incisions but did not perform the procedure. And one group received a placebo surgery where the team did not even make incisions. They mimicked the entire procedure. They put up a screen up so the patient could not see. They made the sounds. They moved the body around. They wheeled the patient out, but did not get it. At every follow-up, the three groups improved identically. Yeah, sit with that for a second. The body that believed it had been repaired found ways to repair itself. This is published. It's peer-reviewed. New England Journal of Medicine. There are even open-label placebo trials, studies in which the patients are explicitly told before the treatment begins that they are receiving a sugar pill. They know. There's no deception. And they still improve. The belief that some form of help is on the way produces an outcome that often we credit to the drug. And the belief does not even require being lied to. The placebo effect is not a confound. The placebo effect is a message. And the message is this: the most powerful force in healing is you, what you believe. So how does this work? How does belief become biology? How does a thought in someone's mind translate into a measurable change in the body? If you followed the work of cellular biologist Bruce Lipton, he's someone who taught at Wisconsin School of Medicine. He conducted research at Stanford on cell membranes and signal transduction. And in the late 1980s, after a career looking through electron microscopes at cells, a career in which he believed that genetics determined the outcomes, he believed in genetic determinisms, he came to a conclusion that changed everything in the way that he thought about the human body. Genes do not control cell behavior. The environment around the cell did. And the cell membrane, the outer wall of the cell's brain, not the nucleus. The membrane reads the chemical and energetic signals of the environment and translates them into cellular response. So the genes inside the nucleus are not the directors of the cell's activity. They're kind of like a library. The cell consults them when the environment calls for a specific protein to be produced. Now follow this, because this is where it gets pretty remarkable. The environment the cell responds to includes the chemical signature of every thought and emotion the human being is producing. So the body is constantly converting consciousness into chemistry. The hormones and neurotransmitters generated by belief, by fear, by gratitude, by despair, by hope, by shame, by love, they are circulating. They reach every cell in the body, and the cells respond. Belief is not just in your head. Belief is at the cell wall. Belief is biology. And when the research documents that patients who believe they are receiving treatment improve, what is being observed is not a trick of the mind. It's a measurable, reproducible, physiologically verifiable chain of events. Consciousness, generating chemistry, instructs the cells. So I think the placebo effect is the wrong name. What is being observed is the biology of belief. And we see this in the other direction too, with the nocebo effect. The nocebo effect describes the documented capacity of negative belief to produce harm. Patients told that the drug will cause nausea experience nausea at a higher rate than patients who were not told this, even when the drug is inert. Patients told they have a serious diagnosis show measurable stress responses, immune suppression, accelerated disease progression, compared to patients with identical presentations who were given a different framing. So let me say this clearly because it matters. A diagnosis delivered without care, delivered as a permanent verdict rather than a working hypothesis, delivered by a clinician operating from fear or from protocols that a pharmaceutical company drilled into them in continuing education, can make a person measurably worse. It's harmful. The diagnosis, the prognosis that is delivered can suppress immunity, increase inflammation, it can alter gene expression. It shifts chemistry in the wrong direction, the label itself. And so this is the operating principle that we don't examine. The human being is not a passive recipient of disease. The human being is an active producer of it. And what you believe about yourself, your condition, your capacity to heal is among the most powerful biological forces in healthcare, more powerful than the drug being prescribed. So let's go back to this. Let's take a step back. Because if consciousness inside you is shaping the cells inside you, then a question follows that we have to ask, like, what else are we shaping? And here's where the conversation gets interesting, because what the research is showing, what spiritual traditions have been telling us, is that your consciousness it's not just limited to your body. There is a field that you are emitting. And when you die, that energy continues, like the soul, the spirit evolves. You're an eternal being. But in this human experience, you are energetic. And there is a field that is emanating outside of you. The human heart has an electromagnetic field. This has been measured. It's not controversial. The Heart Math Institute in California has been decades documenting this. The electromagnetic field of the heart is roughly 5 times stronger than that of the brain. It extends 3 to 5 feet around your body in every direction. And that's why a core argument of my book is that you are energetically impacting people around you. So when you're in the helping professions, just like a therapist or a psychiatrist or a physician or a nurse, your internal state is actually impacting the energetic field of the people that you're interacting with. The signal from one person's heart can be detected in the brainwaves of another person standing by. So think about that. You walk into a room, you bring your field with you. So people in the room are picking up on your field, whether they consciously know it or not. Whether you consciously know it or not, the field carries information. The information includes the coherent or incoherent state of your heart. The information includes the emotions you are carrying, the beliefs you hold about yourself, about that person. You are radiating continuously. You're broadcasting out into a field. You're also a transmitter. You've been transmitting your entire life and you didn't know it, because our paradigm is wrong. And that field, whatever that field is, responds, like resonates. And what you broadcast out, the field returns to you. And this is fascinating, like to see ourselves as projectors, as creator beings, and there is a collective consciousness that we are experiencing from within our own consciousness, and ideas we hold about ourselves project into reality, and we experience that as a society, as a collective humanity. And this is interesting because the story that you tell yourself about who you are, like, for example, like your constant running stream of beliefs, like somebody who never catches a break, or this idea that you are broken, that you have a mental illness, that you're unlovable. This is something that is projecting out into the field and producing a reality you experience, like a loop, like you live inside this projection. Okay, so you take the experiences as evidence that your beliefs are then correct, when in fact the experiences that you have are projections from inside of you. So let me give you a more concrete example. Let's say a person grows up being told and experiences this idea that they're not lovable. So these beliefs, they're installed quite early and very much at a unconscious level. So it's constantly broadcasting in the background. So the person then enters relationships and they behave in ways that are shaped by the belief. They're guarded, they mistrust others, they preemptively reject others, they watch obsessively for evidence that the other person will leave them. Eventually, the relationships fail. Like the form of confirmation bias, right? That's an established cognitive principle. Like what we believe ends up being the focus of our attention. The belief impacts or produces the behavior. It's like a loop. So even in cognitive behavioral therapy, we acknowledge this. Like beliefs and behaviors and emotions are all interacting with each other. And this is kind of an idea of how unconscious creation can work, even if you're outside the idea of quantum reality and quantum physics, or that life is a projection machine. Just the idea of generating this of who you are and then projecting it onto the experiences of others, which are largely neutral, is then creating its own reality. So, I mean, you can do this with anything. How about beliefs you have about money, about your body, about your worth, about what is possible, about the kind of person you are, about the kind of life you get to have, whether life is to be lived fully, to take risks, whether or not it's dangerous. All these things are being projected all the time. This is your reality, but it's not the only reality that's available. As we can see, people are living extraordinarily different realities by what they experience internally. And this is what I think is important and has been a concern of mine for quite some time, is what happens in the mental health field. So if the nocebo effect is real and we create these ideas of psychiatric diagnoses as if they're legitimate, discrete medical conditions, we are actually creating that experience. And what happens then when you go into the therapy relationship? Remember, that's two people in the same collective consciousness, exposed to the same belief systems, the same culture, the same ideas, probably the same algorithms or similar algorithms, maybe watching a similar movie, Netflix show, have gone to public schools. What happens is you have two people who are projecting a similar reality. And what happens is you don't even recognize that internal state. The thoughts, the beliefs, the stories, the narratives themselves are mental constructions. Instead, they are co-creating together. This is why being able to develop a lifestyle where you can be the observer of your own experience through meditation, connection through mindfulness, is so critically important. Being off screens and being away from the matrix in the way that people are so important to your health and well-being, because it's then running in the background all the time and you think that's real. You're attached, you're fused with your own mental constructions as if they're real. And this is going to have impact on your health, the quality of the life that you experience. All of this matters. The Christian mystics called this the watcher at the gate, the Sufis, the witness. Metacognition is how modern psychologists talk about it. They're all talking about the same capacity to step back from your own mental activity far enough to see it only as activity, rather than mistaking it for the truth of who you are. This is the most powerful capacity a human being has. Most people are so fully immersed in their thinking, and it's worse now because of the transhumanists and the technology that exists. Our consciousness is now attached to that phone, that supercomputer, social media. We're constantly being delivered this information about who we are and the reality we live in. And it's so much fear provocation. And we're in this constant state of low-level dis-ease, our body at dis-ease. We're not even aware that these aren't our thoughts. So free will from a new framework, and if you actually had a mental health system that was effective, you would get to see, you get people to see that their minds are creating unconsciously and that they have this powerful capacity energetically to project into the field, that you get to choose in ways that you never could have imagined it, an ability to create a life that is experienced from a higher frequency. Because what happens right now in this matrix installed way of living, with everyone being distracted on their phones, ingesting the division through the government and through the forces that want to keep you in a low level state of stress and fear, where you're constantly attached to their devices and their media and their fear provocation, is you are now becoming what they want you to be. You're producing into the field a lower frequency energetic state. And then what happens is you go into the healthcare centers and the mental health world, and they drug that and they label that. Again, nocebo effect. Belief impacts your biology. We don't talk about this enough when we look at the mental health epidemic, the chronic disease epidemic. The entire system itself is set up energetically to create disease. And one thing you learn from working with people who are in mental distress is you cannot fix a thinking problem with more thinking. And that's exactly what most therapies do. The mind that produced the limiting belief in that story cannot in any way find its way out of it. The mind has to be observed from somewhere deeper than the mind itself, from the awareness that is watching the mind, from consciousness. That is where we get to observe the stories before they start. It should not be a surprise to anybody that the entire mental health industry, from my standpoint, is harmful because it's not teaching these things. And in fact, it's using psychiatric drugs, which are weapons of war, to further enslave. I mean, you already have the technology, you have the constant stream of information, often coming in unconsciously. And there is a war for human consciousness. So the self that's inside of you, the soul, the energy, the life force, the love, is really being muted. And we're living in this survival mind with thoughts that aren't ours, which is constantly creating in a low frequency, which is creating senses of disease and separation. You have to remember you are a creator being. So as a therapist, the most important thing to ask, as you're observing what they're creating internally, are you happy with what you are creating? That's a critical question that's rarely asked. The observation of the stories the mind is creating and just asking them, are you happy with this? You are not small. You are not powerless. You are a sovereign creator being. You're walking through reality. You are co-creating with the field, co-creating in a way with a life force, if you're able to recognize it. Now let's go back to how we open this up, right? I don't think we've scratched the surface of what consciousness can do, of what spirit can do. If the US government has been able to create ways in which remote viewing, where consciousness can leave the body and experience somewhere else, and it's documented, where non-speaking autistic kids have been shown to be able to take their consciousness and leave their body, where telepathy exists. We're just scratching the surface here of what spirit is capable of doing. And we're also scratching the surface on the damages of the labels. We're actually creating disease by delivering in the idea of mental illness or these autoimmune conditions or everything else that is a reflection of the body and dis-ease. We start putting these labels on it, calling it a disease, saying it's something that's genetic, and now you're victimizing, the large portion of the population. The patient, they take that label home and the label begins to broadcast. They have a disorder, they're sick, their brain is defective. What has happened to me is permanent. So every cell hears it, every cell responds. This is critical. Again, this is not fringe. And every time I throw myself into the science about this, I get to observe and question more and more about what am I personally creating in ideas, in consciousness. A great example of this is the typical person who enters into the mental health field right now, who might have gone through some challenging things in specific developmental periods, and that gets labeled quickly, like emotion dysregulation as bipolar disorder. And now you begin to project that out into the field, and you experience everything, even your emotional states, as evidence that that disorder exists. And now you start on at least 2 or 3 drugs, drugs that are going to damage the cell in itself. Mitochondrial poisons like affect the life force within you. Like, this label on every level is a weapon of war. Every single level, it is a direct weapon of war, in a spiritual war for your consciousness. So back to Wayne McDonald, 25-page report, or page 25 of that report is missing. I just wonder what that is. Whatever it was, the conclusion of that report does not necessarily require. The conclusion of the report stands. Consciousness is not confined to the brain. The human being is not a passive observer of the universe. You and I were participating in it and producing it continuously. Go ahead, read it yourself. Download the PDF from the CIA's own website. What do you do with it? I mean, that's the most important thing. To me, it's an opportunity for freedom and free will. You are the one who is aware. You do not have to attach to your mind. You do not have to attach to the narratives and stories that are creating fear all around you. Look at our institutions. They are crumbling. They are falling apart. The US government is a war machine. The medical system is creating more harm than helping. We have been poisoned at a mass scale. All of this is intentional. But if human consciousness, which it is fundamental, then we can rise above all of that. And I think from an energetic spiritual perspective, they know it. We can raise the frequency of the collective consciousness from fear to love, and it's going to infect the physical body so it protects us against all the weapons of war. I certainly understand that these are challenging concepts, and maybe I am only touching the surface for you. At the most simple and basic level, we all know the biology of belief and how powerful that is. So let's move away from the fake diagnoses and the fake conceptualizations. Let's not go into therapy world and just start replaying our past hurts or stories or narratives and limit ourselves about who we are and what we can become. Let's see our true potential. Let's allow those people in front of you, therapists, doctors, to get them to be an observer of their experience, and be very careful about how we influence them with the narratives we create. The psychiatric diagnostic system, what you're all submitting to insurance companies, is the creation of disease itself. The moment you start putting down that false label and start communicating to that person about the nature of their quote unquote mental illness, you are co-creating a reality. This is why this requires a level of discernment, professionalism, and integrity. Step outside of what was taught to you. Awaken. Thank you.